If you're listening to this podcast, it means you're ready, no, more than ready, to have a major breakthrough in your business. You're hungry for change and you're hungry for growth, and that's why you're feeding your mind right now with all this valuable information. But to drive those changes, to be really smart about what you're doing and to make the right choices before you take massive action, you need help from someone who's been there, someone who's going to coach you through it, even just someone to get you started on your journey. That's why Tony Robbins is offering a free one-to-one business strategy session from one of his top business coaches, a $600 value, completely free, no strings attached. That's right, if you're listening right now, you can go to tonyrobbins.com/CEO and sign up for a free session with a member of Tony's team who's helped business owners like yourself overcome their obstacles and set them on the path to success. Hey guys, welcome back to the Tony Robbins podcast. This is Anna, editorial director for Robbins Research International. In this episode, we're continuing our Business Mastery Panelist series with an exclusive interview between Tony and Ikram Magdan Ismail, the co-founder of the digital payment platform Venmo. In case you're not familiar with Venmo, the premise is pretty simple. You connect the app to your checking account, and you can send and receive payments to anyone with just a tap and a swipe of your smartphone. It's the ideal solution for splitting bills and paying your friends back, especially for anyone who doesn't like carrying around cash. Venmo makes exchanging money incredibly simple, and it takes the awkwardness out of asking someone to pay you back. Paying for everything from cab rides to dinners to rent, utilities, it's all streamlined. Venmo was acquired by Braintree in 2012 for $26.2 million, which in turn sold to PayPal for $800 million. And now, Venmo processes more than $6.8 billion in payments every quarter. Yet, as ubiquitous as Venmo is today, it wasn't an easy path to success. Ikram and his co-founder, Andrew Cortina, endured countless obstacles in their early years, struggling to raise capital and almost closing their doors at one point. In this episode, Tony talks to Ikram about the evolution of Venmo, from idea to fruition to acquisition, and how they were able to persevere through even the darkest periods. They discuss the importance of learning to embrace criticism, creating your company's story, and using the no's to refine your approach to find that pivotal yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ikram, the founder of Venmo. Give him a hand.
I am excited.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Tell us the history of this. I mean, you started out, I guess, with you and your roommate. You started out with a different business. You also iterated. Tell us a little bit about what your original business was and how did you iterate and what made it take off?
Yeah, so I had the fortune of being paired with Andrew Cortina, my first roommate in college, and we got to know each other there. So that's how we became friends. And when we were, in college, we started thinking like, what are we going to do once we graduate?
Good question to ask.
and a lot of our friends
After
were...
a lot of partying, was this, or prior to that?
Yeah, a couple cocktails here or there. And a lot of our friends were following routes that we weren't really interested in. So some were becoming investment bankers, some were doing tech gigs at companies like Facebook, Google. And for some reason, it wasn't calling us. And it was difficult then to be among a group of people in school, all doing one thing, and for us to kind of say, like, we got to stay true to ourselves here. Let's not chase something that we're really not passionate about. So it really ended up being me and Cortina at the end of 4 years, looking at each other saying, what are we going to do? Because everyone else has a job. So we graduated, and what we started doing was let's find ways for us to make ends meet while we figure out what we're really passionate about. Yeah. Because we weren't ready to join an investment bank or a tech company as an engineer. I was an engineer by trade, and he was a philosophy student. So we went around door to door in Philadelphia, knocking at restaurants, and we said to restaurant owners, can we make you a website for free food? Because that was one of our necessities, or $200. And that's how we started paying our rent month to month. We were literally living paycheck to paycheck. eventually we were like, okay, no one wants to give us free food, and it's really, really tough to convince a website to spend $200 on a website, so we got to find something else. And that led to the next thing, and it was Cortina and I just getting to know each other in different capacities. And eventually, fast forward 5 years, after the two of us had started a few companies together, some that didn't pan out, some that did, we ended up living apart. I was in Philadelphia, he was in New York City, and one weekend I left my apartment and I got on a Bolt bus, and I was late as usual. So I ran out the door without my wallet. And I'm sure we all do this. We have our phones attached to us all the time. So I had a BlackBerry at the time, and so did Cortina. Somehow I kept my wallet. I left my wallet in the apartment, ran out, caught the bus, but I had my phone. And then I'm thinking like, oh man, Cortina's gonna have to cover the entire weekend in New York City, which is not cheap. But I was like, I knew he would be slightly frustrated by this because I tend to be forgetful sometimes. I get to New York, and I didn't tell him, I didn't text him on the way saying, hey, by the way, you're gonna have to cover my bill. I got there, and I was like, hey, Cortina.
You waited for a personal presentation about that.
Exactly. Hey, Cortina, look, I left my wallet in Philly, you mind covering me? And he was already in credit card debt. And he's like, all right, now I got to take Ikram for the weekend. Fine, we were good friends, so it was all good. And we went out Friday night, we went out Saturday night, and I'm standing there, not paying for anything, and Cortina's just swiping his card and kind of giving me this quirky grin every time he would swipe. And I'm thinking, man, this is a little awkward, but he's my best friend, so we're cool. But I think everyone has a limit. So Sunday comes along, and it's like now I'm about to catch I'm about to catch my bus back home, and it's like that final bill, and the question has yet to come. He's like, so Ikram, when are you going to pay me back? I know that's what's going on in the back of his head. And look, normally, and even nowadays when we hang out, since we are fortunate enough to take care of each other from time to time, we're not that pressed for it. But at the time, we were 27 years old, and we'd been working startups all our life. So his tension was not towards me; it was towards, and really he wanted to be able to cover me because we were good friends. His tension was, I just need my money. Yeah. So then the bill came, and there was this kind of awkward silence between the two of us. The waiter puts the check down on the table, and I look at Cortina. He knows what I'm thinking, and he's like, he pulls the credit card out, puts it down, and I'm like, thanks, man. And we hand it to the waiter. Waiter comes back, and we have this tense, amazing silence. Sometimes in these tense situations come the best of ideas. Or the best of outcomes. And we both, as soon as the check came back to the table, Cortina and I looked at each other and he said, oh, what if I could have just sent you the money for this restaurant bill with my BlackBerry? And that was it. And we kind of said it at the exact same time. And then we extended it further and we said, wait, if we could send each other money, what if we could use our phones to pay back the restaurant? And now we don't have to take our wallet wherever we go. And that was the moment Venmo was born for us. It was a need that the two of us had. There was a little bit of tension, and we were kind of anxious, which was pushing us to find a solution that would keep us together as friends. And we're going to remain friends to the grave, but it was like there was a moment there, and we brought Venmo out of it. So that's how it started.
Pretty amazing. Tell me, give a hand for that for stars, for sure. What, the social aspect of Venmo, tell me how that evolved, because is that more, there's many ways to transfer money, but there's Google and Xerox and Facebook. There are certain people, like Google it, Venmo, like just Venmo me has become the phrase, especially amongst millennials. Tell me a little bit, I want to know both about the name out of curiosity, but first I want to hear about the social side, because as a non-millennial, to me, it's like horrifying to think someone's going to publish all their financial components and share it, and yet for a different generation, it's a very different experience. Tell me about the social, how you came across it, and is it really the glue that separates you? Tell me about your personal views of that.
He just teed me up for a hole-in-one.
Good.
So there's a man back there, Matt DiPasquale, okay, and one of the things I have to say is, when we were starting Venmo, had no idea of what was taking place here, the energy, the incredible amounts of creativity and excitement and positivity. Our third engineer, among the first 5, joined our team, and one of the things that he drilled into us was success leaves clues.
Yes.
And this was a line that was inspired by you.
Yes.
So...
Actually, my teacher, Jim Robbin.
And that's what actually stemmed, that was the origination of the discussion around how can we leverage what's already taking place in today's time.
Yes.
Because before Venmo, there was PayPal.
Yes, exactly.
And before PayPal, there was cash. And maybe some in-betweens. There still is cash. They're probably always building. Now in the future, we've got Bitcoin. But so we actually leveraged that principle, success leaves clues, and it allowed us to have a conversation around what are the popular apps today doing that are causing a new kind of social dynamic. And we started looking at things like, so instead of looking at apps like PayPal or Bank of America or Chase or QuickPay, we were looking at apps that our friends were using. So Instagram, Instagram wasn't even around, but Facebook,
yes.
Twitter,
yes.
Those were the apps that we were studying. And we were saying to ourselves, like, what's the difference between sharing something on Venmo and sharing something on Twitter or Facebook? The only real difference is when you post something on Facebook, you don't include a dollar amount. Okay, so let's learn from that. What if we made it so that when you made a payment on Venmo, you don't share the dollar amount, but you could leave a quirky, fun little note about what you did, because you're using Venmo when you're out with your friends anyway, and this is a way to catalog a memory that you can look back on in life. The other day, there was a record producer talking to me about how they made this hit, this Billboard Top 10 called Caroline, and he was telling me a story about how he would go back to his Venmo feed just as they were, looking at things, like as they were buying things to get the song up and running. So the microphone, they look back and they say, this is when we bought the microphone, and this is what we said at the time.
Wow, history.
The In-N-Out burger, that's where they were eating, and you get this record of your life, and it's very much like Twitter or Facebook, except we don't share the dollar amount. So.
And how long did it take before it took off? Give us a little bit of the history from the time you began, how long before it really took off, and tell us where the name come from. Was it designed specifically for a purpose?
So the name is a combination of vendor mobile, Venmo.
Okay.
And initially we had this idea, we had the notion of, food trucks and places could also accept Venmo.
Yes.
So that's how we got the name. It was available on GoDaddy for... $9 a year. So that was we were grateful for that. It's one of those lucky moments. And then how long did it take to take off? I think it still has a long way to go, but it took about 3 years of arduous work for it to finally get to the point where the people that I was introducing Venmo to were like, okay, this makes sense and it fits into my life. Or they were already in a place where they were using it with friends. But the first year was me pulling out my credit card when I was at dinner with friends and forcing them to pay me back with Venmo. And I almost I would guilt trip them. I'd say, look, if you don't pay me back with Venmo, don't pay me back. And they'd look at me and they're like, all right, Ikram, you're gonna do this again, and I'm racking up, mounds of debt with Chase. Thank you, Chase. And so the first year was a lot of that, and I mean there was a lot of okay, you and Cortina, you guys are gonna get our credit card information, our bank account, and then
that was my next question. At that stage, it's different today. How did you get over the trust factor of giving you that kind of information?
This was another value point of making it so that people could share their payments with each other. We realized early on as a startup, it was going to be very difficult for us to compete with the level of security that someone like Chase or Bank of America offered.
Yes.
They have compliance teams. They have lots of diligence going on with every customer that gets onboarded. For us, we were like, well, if we can show you other, people that using Venmo, then you're more likely to trust it without us having to have full compliance in place. So when you open the app and you see a feed of your friends using Venmo, and you're like, hey, find your friends. These are the people that you could use Venmo with when you go out and about. You're like, oh yeah, you know what? If Joe is using Venmo and Joe's my friend, I guess he trusts it. I trust it too.
Interesting. Wow. What a great spiraling effect for something that would be very difficult normally.
Yeah, that played a big role, I would say, looking back.
You sold the company for $26 million, stayed on board from what I understood, and then it was sold later to Braintree, I think, for $800 million. Tell me, you stayed on for what period? What made you decide to sell? Tell us a little bit about that, because that's a tough thing for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And how many years into it was it?
Okay, so our first acquisition with Braintree was about 3.5 years into us having the first version of Venmo, and that was
how big were you at that time? Like how much were you? How many members did you have?
So we had 5,000 active users and 25,000 users, which is, to me, the fact that Braintree came in and took us on is I'm forever grateful for. But the story goes like this, and it was probably one of the darkest times that I've ever encountered and Venmo encountered, because when we were 3 months before Venmo got acquired by Braintree, we realized that we were spending exponentially compared to any sort of revenue that we were creating. So we actually didn't make any money from day one, because we still today offer Venmo as a free service. So when you pay your friends back, it's free. And early on, we were incurring a 3% credit card fee per transaction. So when we
giving it for free, but you were being charged to give the service.
Yeah, and it got to the point where we had raised $5 million, and we were set out to spend in 1 year $35 million. Now think about that. Now that's one of those you don't do it again, but glad we did it then.
Explain that math to us. How you kept going.
Yeah,
I want to know.
We were naive. And sometimes that works to your advantage, because the reason a lot of people weren't getting into payments is because it's so expensive. But we were two guys that just needed a way to pay each other back, and that's all we cared about. And that as long as our friends were paying us back, we were paying them back. We weren't really worried about the other details. But lo and behold, now we're growing from a basement startup to. We have a board of directors. We've raised our first round of funding, and we're starting to learn about financial planning. We were very much learn as we grow.
Yes.
And we start looking at the numbers, and there was a 2-month period where all of a sudden Venmo, the amount of volume that was flowing through Venmo started increasing exponentially. And we only caught it 6 months after we had raised our Series A round of financing.
Yes.
And I remember very vividly being in a board meeting with me, Cortina, and 3 other people, Samir Gandhi from Excel, and Ian Sigalo, and Eric Weissen from RRE. And we said, look, we really need you to re-up your investment because we think Venmo is still going to be a big smash, but unfortunately we have some cost structures to fix. Now, I've learned the second time around how to back that up, because the first time we were a little nervous. We didn't really know we could fix it. And our investors were viewing us as a seed stage investment. They just wanted to see, look, can these guys take it from this phase to the next? And the next phase for us was, we need $100 million to continue growing a 5,000 member company, to the next PayPal. And that story, if you imagine us telling that story then, 6 months after raising our first $5 million, we weren't that convincing, because they were like, well, how did you not see this in the first place? Well, we erupted, we didn't know. So none of our investors were willing to participate in our next round. That said, we were all trying to figure it out together. It was more like, hey, can we find another solution? And in this period, Cortina and I were having conversations like, okay, we're not going to be able to make next month's payroll. So we started talking to our employees about what it would take for us to wind Venmo down. Him and I were thinking about possible things we could do to keep it around if it was just the 2 of us running it, because we really, really didn't want to let go of Venmo. And one of the things that was really nice about Venmo is the entire team, no matter how much money we were making or how much we had to gain, the entire team was very passionate about the product, because we put our blood, sweat, and tears into making that product an experience that people would love. And 2 weeks before, so I had a meeting like this in front of not this many people, but 25 people, and I sat down and I said, it must be much tougher with this many. And I sat down and I said, look, thank you for all your hard work, but it seems like we're not able to garner any more investment to continue running Venmo. As you know, it's very expensive, and we made a few mistakes in terms of our cost structure that we had to fix. And, hopefully we all learned something together. Let's take all this energy and build something great next time around. That was the conversation we have. And now everyone at the company is, looking for another job, or we're trying to help people figure out what comes next. And by the grace of Spirit, God, whatever, good energy and positive vibes, this guy, Bill Reddy, called us up and said, and it was an introduction from one of our board members, Samir Gandhi, and said, hey, what are you guys up to with this Venmo thing? And he was the CEO of a very profitable company called Braintree that was not a consumer-facing product. It was a B2B product. And he was looking for a young consumer team to come and spice things up a little bit for them. And he called us up and he said, hey, we really like what you're doing with Venmo. Can we fly you out to talk about it? And we didn't really know then that this was would lead to any sort of acquisition. And this is something that I remind myself, of every day. You never know what sign you're going to get. But if you feel something and it feels great, follow it. The way Bill talked to us was he was very passionate about what we were doing. We talked to Groupon. Groupon offered Venmo $3 million, and we'd raised $5 million. Facebook interviewed our entire team, decided to pass. MasterCard was interested, but there was going to be a year-long diligence, and we're like, a year? And Bill Reddy flew us into Chicago. We were in a room with 6 or 7 people, and in the middle of it, Bill said, we were talking about, can we partner with you? Can you fund us for another 6 months while we, figure out this cost structure? You can own a piece of Venmo, and then let's make a partnership. And Bill goes, well, what if we just did an acquisition? And I was the one that answered that, and I said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, when you're 2 weeks to closing your doors.
Yeah, baby. And he said, how much? I said 26.6 million. That was it. And he said, I'm in. And that's how it went down. Like, I hope Bill's watching. Thank you, man. And we're brothers now. And it's like that, you know, the purest, I mean, just for an idea, every investor that we pitched Venmo to said no, but one said yes. And we kept pitching. You know, for me, one of the things that I studied in school was theater. And what you learn when you're in theater class is how to accept criticism. And if you can accept criticism, you can build upon that. So all the no's that investors were giving us were just our ways of refining the pitch so that we could eventually find that one yes. It was practice. And then the person that said yes is the one that introduced us to Bill Reddy, who's the one that said yes again. And he was the only person that was interested in acquiring Venmo that said yes. But we would fight for those yeses, and when we got them, we took them. So.
And you learned when they said no, you looked at why. It sounds like to dig underneath.
Yeah, what's missing from the story here?
Yes.
And then you go back to the drawing board. You figure out how to reshape the story, and you keep. You know, there are 8 billion people.
Wow. And so for you now, I'm sorry for my ignorance, are you still involved with the company? It's been sold, or you were involved during the days that it was still part of Braintree, is that correct?
I'm not officially involved. Every now and then I get a text from the product team saying, what do you think of the new Venmo mission? And I say, talk to my agent. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But, what I'm doing now is I'm a cheerleader. I hope Venmo is here as long as I'm and beyond. So
that's beautiful. Let's have a big hang for Ikram.
The Tony Robbins podcast is directed and hosted by Tony Robbins. Anna York is our editorial director and occasional host. Our executive producer is Carrie Song. Jamie Carvajal and Adriel De La Torre are our digital editors. Special thanks to Mary Buckheit and Diane Adcock for their creative review.